watched my daughter through the diner window, her apron tied neat around her waist, moving between tables with that quiet efficiency she'd had since she was 16. 22 now, pre-med at Ohio State, Dean's List 3 semesters running, and she still picked up weekend shifts at Harlow's Diner on Broad Street because she refused to let me pay her phone bill. The morning light came through the glass at a low angle and caught her hair, and for a second I saw her mother in her completely. Same jaw, same way of tilting her head when a customer said something unexpected. Her name was Abby. My daughter. My whole world since her mom Christine passed from ovarian cancer when Abby was 6. 16 years of the two of us, our small house in Westerville, my job as a high school history teacher, her part-time jobs and straight A's, and the way she never once asked me to feel sorry for her. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table where I'd left it. My brother Drew's name on the screen. Hey, still coming Saturday for the 4th of July thing, right? I typed back that yes, Abby and I would be there around 2. 3 dots appeared. Then, about that, Melissa was hoping to keep it kind of intimate this year. Close friends, her family from Connecticut, some of her work people. You know how she gets about these things. I set the phone down and looked back through the window. Abby was laughing at something an older gentleman at the counter had said. I picked the phone back up. Abby's my daughter Drew. She's your niece, I know. I know that. It's just Melissa's boss is going to be there and a couple of the partners from his firm. She wants everything to be a certain way. She mentioned that Abby waiting tables might come up if people ask what she does, and she's worried it'll lead to the wrong conversation. I read that twice, then a third time. She's waiting tables to help put herself through medical school, I wrote back. She has a 3.9. She's been accepted to volunteer at Children's Hospital starting in the fall. We know that, Ben. We do. It's just these people don't know her. They'll hear waitress and make assumptions. Melissa just wants one afternoon without having to manage perceptions. I looked at the diner again. Abby had moved to a booth near the back. She was kneeling beside a little kid who'd dropped something under the table, helping him find it, smiling the whole time. We'll be there at 2, I wrote, and put the phone away. I didn't tell Abby about that conversation. She was excited about the 4th. Drew had one of those houses in Bexley with the big backyard that backed up to a ravine, and every year his wife Melissa organized a party that looked like it came out of a catering magazine. Abby had already bought a hostess gift, a nice bottle of wine she'd picked out herself with money from her last 2 shifts. She'd kept the receipt because she wasn't sure if Melissa preferred red or white and wanted to exchange it if needed. You think Chloe and Jackson will be in the pool? She asked on the drive over. Chloe was Drew's 16-year-old daughter, Jackson his 13-year-old son. I haven't seen them since Thanksgiving. Probably, I said. I got Chloe that skincare thing she mentioned. The Cossacks serum. She posted about wanting it, so I figured. I kept my eyes on the road. That was thoughtful. I just like getting people things they actually want, you know. We pulled up to Drew's house at 1:55. The street was already crowded with cars. A catering van was parked in the side alley. Through the wood-paneled privacy fence, I could hear music, voices, the sound of people who had been drinking since noon. Melissa answered the door. She was wearing a white linen sundress with her hair done up the way she did it for events she considered important. Her smile landed on me first, then adjusted when she saw Abby. The adjustment was small, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't her brother-in-law of 8 years. Ben, you're early. Not a greeting. We thought we could help with anything last minute. Everything's handled. The caterers took care of it. Her eyes moved to Abby's sundress. Target, $40. pressed carefully that morning. Drew's out back. Why don't you head through Ben? Her voice dropped slightly. Abby, I wonder if you wouldn't mind hanging out in the sunroom for a bit, just until everyone's settled. A few guests have already arrived who I need to introduce properly, and I don't want to make it a whole thing. Abby's shoulders went tight, almost invisible, but I knew her body. Oh, sure. That's fine. There's a fan in there. Drinks in the mini fridge. It's actually very comfortable. It's fine, Aunt Melissa. Really. And she went. She walked down the hall toward the sunroom with her hostess gift still under her arm, and she didn't look back, and I stood there in the entryway of my brother's house, and I let her. That's the part I'm not proud of. I went out back. Drew was standing near the gas grill with a bottle of Sam Adams, talking to two men in Patagonia quarter zips despite it being 84 degrees. He waved me over, made introductions. The men were named something I immediately forgot. One of them worked in commercial real estate and had that quality some men have of making you feel like they're doing you a favor by talking to you. I kept glancing toward the sunroom windows. Drew pulled me aside after a few minutes. I heard what Melissa asked. It's temporary. Once the Harrington crowd gets settled and the food comes out, Abby can come mingle. She's 22, Drew. She drove up from Columbus for this. I know. I love her. But Melissa's been planning this for 6 weeks, and the Harrington account alone is worth. He stopped. Checked himself. Look, 1 hour. Then she's out here with everyone. I should have gone back inside right then. I know that. I've replayed enough times. But I told myself 1 hour wasn't long. I told myself I didn't want to make it worse for Abby by causing a scene. I told myself I'd check on her in 20 minutes. 40 minutes passed. I excused myself from a conversation about interest rates and went inside. The sunroom was off the main hallway, glass on 3 sides, wicker furniture, a rattling ceiling fan. Abby was sitting on the love seat with her phone face down in her lap. She'd opened a bottle of sparkling water from the mini fridge. She hadn't touched it. The condensation had made a ring on the coaster. She looked up when I came in. Her face did something complicated. Not crying. She'd learned not to cry about this kind of thing. Hey, I said. Hey. She tried for a small smile. Got halfway there. I sat down across from her. How long have you been in here? It's fine, Dad. Abby. She looked at the window that faced the backyard. Through it I could see Melissa moving through the lawn chairs, touching people's arms, laughing. Chloe was out there in a swimsuit, hair wet, eating something off a skewer. Jackson was throwing a football with one of the catering staff's kids. Chloe came in about 15 minutes ago, Abby said. To get a soda. She saw me and just kind of stopped. Like she didn't know what to do. She said, Mom said you needed some quiet time. Then she left. She paused. I'm 22. I don't need quiet time. I didn't say anything. And the thing is, Abby said quietly, I saved for 3 weeks to get her that serum. There it was. That specific detail. That specific hurt. Not the big humiliation of being placed in a sunroom like something that needed to be kept out of sight. The 3 weeks of saved tips that bought a gift for a girl who walked away without saying thank you. How long has this been happening? I asked. She pulled her knee up to her chest, looked at the ceiling fan. Since they got married. Since I was 14. She was quiet for a moment. Remember the Christmas I was 15? Melissa had everyone draw names for Secret Santa, except I wasn't included in the draw because Melissa said I wasn't part of the immediate family. You got me something and told me it was from the group. I knew it wasn't. The tag was in your handwriting. I hadn't known she'd noticed that. The summer I was 17. The family photos at the lake house. Melissa asked the photographer to do a round of just her family first. Drew, her, Chloe, Jackson. Then she said the light was going and they only had time for one more, so they did one with just you and me added. But she's cropped that photo down to just the four of them on her Christmas cards every year since. I've seen them. You send the same card. Each thing she said landed somewhere specific. I never said anything because Drew is your only family besides me. And I didn't want to be the reason you lost that. She looked at me directly then. But I'm 22 now, Dad, and I'm sitting in a sunroom on the 4th of July while Chloe swims in the pool 30 feet away. I reached across and put my hand over hers. She was 22, and she had her mother's eyes, and she had been navigating this quietly, alone, since she was 14 years old. Finish the water, I said. Then we're going outside. Dad, please don't. We're going outside, Abby. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up the sparkling water and drank half of it. We walked out through the back door together. The party was in full swing. 40 people maybe, spread across the patio and the lawn. A bartender was working a folding table near the pergola. The catering team was bringing out trays of sliders and something wrapped in prosciutto. Over by the pool, Chloe looked up and saw Abby and looked away. Melissa materialized at my elbow within 30 seconds. She had a talent for that. Ben, perfect timing, the food's just. Where do you want us to sit? I asked. There are lawn chairs by the, not lawn chairs, at the table, where everyone else is. Her smile tightened by a fraction. The table is for the Harrington group and their spouses. I have you and Abby at the side table near the Melissa. I said it quietly. My daughter is not sitting at a side table. I don't think you understand how important this afternoon is for Drew. I understand completely. I found 2 empty seats at the main table between a woman in a yellow dress and an older man who turned out to be Melissa's uncle. I pulled one out for Abby, then sat down in the other. Melissa stood at the end of the table. Her expression was the social equivalent of a closed fist. The Harrington group filtered in as food arrived. Melissa made her rounds, introductions, laughing at the right moments. The woman in the yellow dress turned out to be a pediatrician from Dublin, Ohio, and she and Abby fell into an easy conversation about the Children's Hospital program. The older man next to me told a very long story about a fishing trip that I actually enjoyed. I watched Abby relax by degrees. By the time the burgers came out, she was leaning forward with her elbows on the table, animated, telling the pediatrician about the research he'd been reading on pediatric sepsis detection. The pediatrician was listening hard, the way doctors listen when they're actually interested. Then Melissa's oldest girlfriend, who'd had 3 glasses of wine, looked across the table and said loudly, "So Abby, what do you do?" I don't think I caught it. Before Abby could answer, Chloe, who had come up behind me to grab something off the condiment tray, said, "She's a waitress at a diner in Columbus." Said it the way you'd say it about a stranger. Light, dismissive. Like it answered the question fully. The table went slightly quiet. Abby's face went still. I put down my fork. I'm not a person who gives speeches. I've been in front of high school classes for 17 years, and I'm comfortable talking, but I don't make speeches. Ask anyone who knows me. What I said next came out very calm, which surprised me, because my hands were not calm under the table. She works at that diner, I said, to cover her living expenses so she doesn't graduate with debt. She's pre-med at Ohio State. 3.9 GPA. She volunteers at Nationwide Children's Hospital starting in September. She got into 2 research programs this year and had to turn one down because she didn't have time for both. She bought Chloe a $40 skincare product this morning with money from her last 2 shifts. Chloe didn't say thank you. The table was quiet. Chloe had gone very still behind me. I looked at Melissa. My daughter has worked for everything she has. She doesn't drive a car you bought her. She doesn't have her tuition covered. She gets up at 6 on Saturdays and puts on an apron, and she does it without complaining because she understands that things worth having take effort. That's not something to be quietly managed away from your important guests. I paused. It's something to be proud of. Melissa's face had moved through several colors. You're making a scene. You put my daughter in a sunroom. I was managing the dynamics of you put my daughter in a sunroom, I said again, on the 4th of July, so she wouldn't embarrass you in front of people she'd never met. She's been in that room for 40 minutes. I looked down the table toward Drew. He was watching me with his beer held in both hands and his elbows on the table. I'm not making a scene. I'm saying out loud what's been true for 8 years. Drew set his beer down. He looked at Abby, then at me, then at the table. Melissa, he said, he's right. Melissa turned toward him slowly. Drew, he's right. This isn't. He stopped. Tried again. She's my niece. She drives up from Columbus, and we put her in the sunroom. He pushed back from the table slightly. I'm sorry, Abby. I'm genuinely sorry. Abby looked at her uncle for a moment. Then she said, thank you, Uncle Drew, and her voice was even composed, and I could tell it had cost her something to keep it that way. Melissa set down her napkin and walked inside. The pediatrician in the yellow dress looked at Abby and said, Pre-med at Ohio State. Tell me where you're thinking for med school. And just like that, the conversation moved forward. We didn't stay much longer after that. An hour maybe, long enough to eat, long enough for Jackson to come over and actually talk to Abby about the coding class he'd started, which she was genuinely interested in. Long enough for the Harrington group to drift toward the bar and stop mattering. We said our goodbyes. Drew walked us to the car. Melissa did not come out. At the curb he hugged Abby for a long time. She let him. I'll do better, he said. I know that doesn't fix 8 years. No, she said. It doesn't. But she wasn't unkind about it. He hugged me too. You were right about all of it. He looked like he hadn't slept, which he hadn't, not that day, but I could see the tired that was older than that. The particular exhaustion of a man who'd been working very hard to not notice things. On the drive home, Abby was quiet for the first 20 minutes. I didn't push it. Outside Columbus, the sky was going orange, and you could see the first faint thread of fireworks starting somewhere over toward Gakana. She said, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. I mean, I've been managing it fine. I had systems. I almost laughed. Systems. I knew not to get too hopeful. I knew not to expect things. It's actually not that hard once you. She stopped. Okay, it's a little hard. I know, the Christmas card thing still bothers me. Is that stupid? It's a Christmas card. It's not stupid at all. She looked out at the fireworks, red and white blooms over the suburbs. I keep thinking about when I was 14. First time Melissa did the family photo thing. I stood there and watched the photographer take the shot. And then she said the light was gone, and I looked at you and you had that look on your face where you're trying not to show something. And I thought, okay, so that's how this is. I just fired it away. She was quiet. I spent 8 years filing things away. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything right to say. So I just drove and let her talk. And she did, for a while, and then she didn't. And we listened to the radio the rest of the way into the city. That was in July. 3 weeks later, Drew called and asked if he could take Abby and me to dinner. Neutral ground, he said. His idea. I told him I'd ask Abby. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she said yes, but she wanted it to be somewhere she picked. She chose a Thai place on High Street that she liked. A small room with paper menus and a fish tank near the door. Not anywhere impressive. Somewhere she felt comfortable. Drew came alone. He looked thinner than I'd seen him, wearing a regular shirt and jeans, instead of the Patagonia and chinos he wore to every event Melissa organized. He looked like himself actually. The way he'd looked before all of this. He apologized. He did it directly, without qualifications. He said he had told himself for years that Melissa's behavior was manageable, that it wasn't malicious exactly, just social anxiety expressed badly, and that he'd made himself believe that because it was easier than admitting he'd been choosing his wife's comfort over his own family. He said that specifically, choosing comfort over family. He looked at Abby when he said it. Abby listened to all of it. When he finished, she said, I appreciate that. I'm not ready to go back to holidays and big events yet, but I'd be open to this. Dinner. Low-key, if it's consistent. Drew said consistent was something he could do. He's been doing it. Monthly dinners, always the Thai place or sometimes a burger place. Abby likes in Clintonville. He came to her research presentation at OSU in October, sat in the second row and asked a real question during the Q&A, not a softball. After, he took us to get ice cream and listened to Abby talk for an hour about the gap in early detection protocols. And I watched my brother, the one I grew up with, the one who taught me to drive stick in our parents' parking lot, come back from wherever he'd been. He and Melissa are separated now. He told me in November she'd taken the Bexley house and he was in an apartment in the short north. He didn't seem devastated exactly. More like someone who'd been holding a very heavy thing for a long time and had finally set it down. I kept thinking if I was better at managing her, he said, at keeping all the pieces in place, it would eventually feel worth it. He picked at the label on his beer. But some things don't feel worth it, Ben. Some things just feel like you've been wrong for a long time. I didn't tell him I was sorry, because I wasn't sure I was. I told him that. He said, that's fair. Abby applied to medical school in October. 6 schools including Case Western and Vanderbilt. She got her first acceptance letter in February. Case Western, which was her first choice because it's 2 hours from home and she liked the program's approach to community medicine. She called me from the parking lot outside Harlow's, still in her apron, and she was crying, which she almost never does, and I stood in my kitchen and cried a little too, which I also almost never do. I need to tell you something, she said, once we'd both gotten it together. Okay, when I was sitting in that sunroom, at the 4th of July thing, before you came in, she paused. I'd actually been in there long enough to make a whole plan, like a concrete plan. I was going to wait until the end of summer and then just stop going to Drew and Melissa's things entirely. Just quietly cut it off. Tell you it was about scheduling. Never explain. Another pause. I was going to carry that by myself because I didn't want you to have to lose your brother. I sat down at the kitchen table. Abby, I know, but I didn't know you would come in. Her voice was soft. I didn't know you'd do what you did. I'd filed it away for so long, I think I sort of forgot that wasn't just how things had to be. I thought about her at 14, watching a photographer take a family photo she wasn't in, filing it away. I thought about a secret Santa list with her name left off and a Christmas card with her face cropped out of it, and 8 years of small systematic exclusions that each one alone could be explained away but stacked up into something that had convinced my daughter, without her ever consciously deciding it, that she was not worth making a fuss over. You are worth the fuss, I said. You have always been worth it. She was quiet on the other end. Then I know that now. She started at Case Western in August. She still picks up shifts at Harlow's when she's home on breaks. Tips the kitchen staff. Knows the regulars by name. There is nothing about that she is ashamed of, and she shouldn't be, because hard work in plain sight is not something to hide from anyone. Chloe sent a text 2 months after the 4th of July party. Just to Abby, not through any family ching. It said, I looked up the serum you got me. It's really good, I've been using it. Sorry I didn't say that before. Abby showed me the text. She wrote back 2 words, glad it helped. She didn't tell me what to make of that. I didn't ask. Some things you let be what they are, a small door left open, neither fully closed nor fully walked through. That's enough. That's more than enough sometimes. Drew came to her Case Western orientation weekend in August. He met her roommate, saw her dawn, took us to dinner at a steakhouse near campus where he ordered a bottle of wine and toasted her 3 separate times, once sincerely, once because the first one made him emotional and he wanted to recover, and once at the end because he said he kept thinking of things he should have said for the past 8 years. Abby laughed at that third toast. Real laugh, the kind that comes all the way up. She has her mother's laugh, big and sudden, and it still catches me off guard sometimes. The way a thing you love can still surprise you after 22 years. Driving home from Columbus that Sunday, I thought about that July afternoon, about the sunroom and the sparkling water with the ring on the coaster and my daughter's face doing that complicated thing, about the choice I almost didn't make. The 40 minutes I let go by before I went back inside. I think about that part more than any other part, because Abby told me she had a plan, a whole quiet plan to disappear from our family life and shoulder it alone, indefinitely, to protect me from losing my brother. She was 22, and she had already decided to do that, and the only reason she didn't is that I walked through a door. That's not heroic. Walking through a door 40 minutes late is not heroic, but sometimes the things that change everything aren't grand. They're just the moment when you stop telling yourself that 20 more minutes won't matter and you get up and you go find your kid. Stand up for them, not eventually, not when it's easy or when the calculus finally tips in your favor. Now today, in the 40 minutes you think you have to spare. They're watching. They're learning what they're worth by watching what you do, and they will carry whatever lesson you teach them for a very long time, in ways neither of you will fully see. Until one day they're sitting on the phone in a parking lot in an apron telling you they got in, and you'll understand that every one of those moments, the ones you stood up for them and the ones you wish you had, all of it built something. You just don't always get to see the whole shape of it until much later. That's the thing I think about on Sunday evenings when the house is quiet. Not the champagne, not the big moment, just the door I almost didn't go through. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since that July afternoon. Not in any grand philosophical way, just the small ordinary version of it that plays out across years without anyone naming it while it's happening. Melissa didn't wake up one day deciding to be cruel. It was smaller than that. It was a secret Santa list where one name got left off. A photographer told the light was gone. A Christmas card cropped down to 4 faces instead of 6. Each one defensible on its own. Each one alone, something you could explain away with scheduling or space or just not thinking. But stacked across 8 years, those small decisions built something. They built a version of reality inside my daughter where she was the kind of person whose presence needed to be managed. where she was the kind of person who, at 22, had already made a quiet plan to disappear from her own family rather than cause trouble. That's what gets me, not the sunroom, the plan. Abby didn't tell me about the plan to make me feel guilty. She told me because she'd gotten into Case Western and she was happy and she wanted me to understand the full shape of what that day had been. And when she told me, I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. The damage done by being excluded isn't just the moment of exclusion. It's what a person concludes about themselves from the pattern. Abby had concluded, without ever deciding to, that she was not worth disrupting an afternoon for. She had filed that conclusion away so neatly that she'd built an exit strategy around protecting it. What I did in that backyard didn't undo 8 years. I know that. I said some things at a table and moved to place cards, and Drew apologized and Melissa walked inside. That's not a transformation. But here's what I've come to believe about moments like that. They interrupt a pattern, and interrupting a pattern, even once, even imperfectly, changes what a person believes is possible. Abby believed, on some level she'd never examined, that this was simply how things were, that you filed things away and you built systems and you managed your expectations down to a size that wouldn't hurt so much. What she didn't know, because I hadn't shown her yet, was that it was also possible for someone to walk through a door and say out loud that she was worth that Jaffa's worth disruption, that her $40 gift and her 3.9 GPA and her Saturday apron and her children's hospital volunteer slot all added up to a person who deserved a seat at the table. Not a side table, the table. I think about the kind of person Abby is becoming, not just the doctor she's going to be, though I'm proud of that every single day. I mean the person. She tips the kitchen staff. She knows her regulars by name. She treats a 13-year-old kid's interest in coding like it matters, because to her it does. She bought a skincare product for a girl who walked away without saying thank you, and she didn't hold that against her. When Chloe finally sent that text 2 months later, Abby wrote back 2 words and left the door open. She didn't need the apology to be perfect. She just needed it to be real. That's character built by experience, not by instruction. You can tell a child they have worked every day and it will help. But what they watch you do is what they believe. Every time I showed up and every time I didn't, she was watching and learning what the rules were. The 14 minutes I spent at that party talking about interest rates, before I went to find her, she knew about those 40 minutes. She'd been counting them. Stand up for your kids. Not eventually. Not once the calculus tips in your favor. Now, today, in the 40 minutes, you keep telling yourself you can spare, because they are learning, right now, what they are worth. And the lesson you teach them will last a great deal longer than you think.